Sit right there. He isn't coming to save you. What the hell is going on here? My voice tore across the driveway, cracked with disbelief, too loud for a home that was supposed to be filled with love that day. Tires hissed to a stop on the cobblestone like a snake drawing breath. In the freeze frame before everything shattered, I saw the whole tableau as though a camera were hovering above us. My 78-year-old mother Miriam, my 13-year-old daughter Selma, my only sister Brenda, all in white, all drenched, muddy water crawling down their sleeves, dripping off their hems, turning dignity into sludge. And Genevieve, my fiancée, the woman I'd spent months learning, trusting, loving, stood with an empty bucket going slack in her hands, eyes blown wide as a siren. The bucket clattered. My heart did too. Before we continue, please click on that subscribe button, like this video, and comment which country you're listening from. I'd love to know where you are watching me from. Thank you. It was supposed to be perfect. March 15th, Genevieve's birthday. I had orchestrated the kind of day that makes men foolish and women radiant. A brand new Mercedes-Benz idling at the dealership under a red bow so large it could have been its own weather system. 2 tickets to the Maldives tucked into an envelope alongside a dinner reservation, coded with my name at the kind of restaurant where a single sigh costs more than an entree anywhere else. The surprise required choreography. A small lie in the morning. I'm slammed in meetings. We'll celebrate later, sweetheart. And a bigger truth by nightfall. That in front of God and anyone nosy enough to watch, I was choosing Genevieve. Choosing us. Choosing a future beyond grief's long hallway. I had a co-conspirator, Brenda. I phoned her 30 minutes before the scene that would end us. Hey sis, I'm about 10 minutes away. Please tell me you have Genevieve ready and waiting outside like we planned. Oh yes, Louis, she answered, a flutter in her voice I wanted to hear as excitement. Everything is perfectly set up. She's going to be so surprised. Set up. If I'd been listening with anything but a lover's optimism, that phrase would have set off alarms. As my car curved around the last bend, and the house opened like a private theater, the film switched genres. What I'd staged as a romance revealed itself as something meaner. That still image snapped back to life. My mother's gray hair matted, Selma's ruined school uniform clinging to her like a second skin. Brenda's blouse stuck to her shoulders as if the fabric were ashamed to be part of the moment. The water on the brick was brown and streaking, tracking all the pathways Hurt uses to get in. I killed the engine and stepped out before the door had a chance to swing back. What the hell is going on here? I repeated, and this time it wasn't a question. It was an accusation with edges. Genevieve's head jerked up. Panic rode her face, then something like pleading. Louis, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. Isn't what it looks like, I pointed, a prosecutor on his worst day. My daughter, my mother, and my sister are soaked in dirty water, and you're holding the bucket. What exactly do you think this looks like? My mother was crying, soft and injured, the sound of an old clock breaking. Selma, my bright girl, swallowed a sob and whispered, Daddy, I'm cold, clutching at me with fingers that had learned to be brave too early. Brenda stood with her jaw set and her glare honed to a blade, positioning herself between the soaked and the accused like she was shielding us from a storm that wore stilettos. An accident, Genevieve said. Brenda asked me to. An accident. Brenda cut in, voice shaking but lethal. You were screaming at us before you threw it. Tell the truth. I wasn't. Mrs. Johnson, Genevieve's eyes flicked toward my mother, then back to me, desperate for someone to choose the version of reality where she was still the woman I'd promised the world to. Sit right there, Brenda snapped toward Genevieve, low and controlled. He isn't coming to save you. I heard the sentence but didn't understand it. Not then. It would spool back later, a rope with knots I'd ignored. Let me say the part that will make some of you furious. I am not just any man. I am Lewis Johnson. The magazine covers, the boardrooms, the empire that haters like to say just happened after 20 years of nights that never ended. People call that power. Here is the truth no one prints. Money doesn't buy you X-ray vision for the human heart. It seduces you into thinking you can audit pain like a spreadsheet, that the narrative with the cleanest balance sheet is the one that adds up. That day, the evidence was wet, cold, and right in front of me. My math was merciless. Look at them, I told her, voice thundering, because thunder is easier than doubt. Look at my family. Selma shivered against me. I'm okay, Daddy, she said, because she has always tried to be what the room needed. My uniform. We're getting you warm right now. I pulled her close, then guided my mother onto the steps, my hand a railing her bones could trust. Mom, are you hurt? Miriam's words wobbled. I can't believe she would do this. Louis, Genevieve said again, quieter now, like my name was a lock she might still pick. Please, 5 minutes. Let me tell you what really happened. In the periphery, Brenda shook her head, almost a whisper. Don't let her gaslight you. This is where people will argue about what love should do. Should a man, confronted with a scene that scorches his faith, pause for context? Should a father weigh a fiancé's story against his child's tears? Should a son interrogate his mother's version of danger? That's the controversy that will burn in this series like a pilot light. I made a decision. Father first, son second, brother third. Man in love somewhere limping behind them. Maybe you'll say I ranked my roles right. Maybe you'll say I used those roles as a shield because I was afraid to see what was actually true. Get your things, I told Genevieve, each word an iron rung. Get out. Get out of my house and our lives and don't come back. There are words a man can take back in private, with time and treatment and humility. There are words that echo so loud in a courtyard that they remake the air. She stared at me like an emergency room patient who had just realized the doctor was walking past. She set the ring on the side table by the door, a bright geometry on stained wood, and left without slamming anything, because she has always known the difference between fury and dignity. Inside, after the showers and the clean clothes and the fragile cocoa, after Selma's small hands returned to their usual warmth, we sat in a circle that looked like safety and felt like rubble. We tried to tell you, my mother murmured. Some people don't belong in a family like ours. There were signs, Brenda added. Too perfect, too fast, too curated. Curated. Like love was a gallery putting on a show for rich fools. Maybe I was the easiest mark. Man with money, widower with soft spots, father with an open wound. I told myself I'd done the right thing. That's how people survive the first 24 hours after they amputate something that still twitches. They call it mercy. That night, I lay in a room Genevieve had once filled with the quiet noises of a second chance. Her toothbrush in the drawer beside mine, her sweater on the chair like a small animal sleeping. The house, which money always promises will keep you company, sounded cavernous again. I replayed the afternoon on loop, drawing arrows in my mind like a detective on a wall. Bucket, brown water, white clothes, my family, my love, my rage. Everything lined up too neatly to doubt. That felt like comfort, and comfort is a dangerous kind of liar. Before you decide I'm a villain or a victim, understand this. Our quarrel isn't just about an empty bucket. It's about perception, how it can be staged, how grief can prime it, how family can weaponize it, how power can anesthetize it. In a world where money buys microphones and privilege buys applause, perception wins the first round almost every time. But here's what I didn't know yet. Perception isn't the story, it's the trailer. And trailers lie. My name is Lewis Johnson. People call me a billionaire, like that word explains me. It doesn't explain how a boy from Detroit learned to love one girl for 20 years until cancer stole her breath. It doesn't explain how a man can step into a bright new love and still be followed by old ghosts. It doesn't explain how easy it is to mistake a performance for proof when the performers wear your blood and your last name. So yes, I walked into a nightmare on the day I planned a miracle. I banished the woman I loved because the scene told me I had to. I told myself I'd protected my family, and I slept beside that lie because it was warm. But let me back up. Let me pull the camera off that driveway and rewind to the beginning, before the mud and the bucket, before the bow and the plane tickets, back to grief's long season and the day a pharmacist with intelligent eyes said my daughter was a credit to her father. Because the story of Genevieve and me isn't a fairy tale or a fiasco. It's a slow autopsy of trust, and the first cut is always cleanest. You can't understand why the driveway exploded unless you know what came before the bucket, before the bow, before the Maldives and the Mercedes. Before Genevieve, there was LaToya. We met when we were 15, two kids with dreams bigger than our neighborhood in Detroit. She had a laugh that turned any room into Sunday morning. And I had a notebook where every corner was filled with plans, businesses, ideas, blueprints for a life that was supposed to stretch forever. We grew up together, hand in hand, from high school lockers to boardroom skyscrapers. When the money came, it didn't change us. It just meant LaToya could finally fill our home with everything she had circled in catalogs we couldn't afford before. But money has no currency in the oncology ward. When the doctor said stage 4, our empire shrank to the size of a hospital bed. She made me promise one thing. Take care of our baby, and don't you dare forget to take care of yourself. When she passed, silence moved into the house like a permanent tenant. The walls were too wide, the nights too long. My mother Miriam moved in, filling the space with casseroles and quiet judgment. Brenda, my sister, was suddenly always around, telling herself she was helping. Selma, my daughter, was only 10 then. Too young to lose her mother, too old to not understand. She learned to swallow tears like pills. For 3 years, I walked through that house like a ghost that refused to lie down. And then I met her, Genevieve, not in some gala, not in the boardroom, not in the pages of a business magazine. I met her in a pharmacy. She was standing behind the counter, explaining side effects to a grandmother with arthritis, like she had all the time in the world. She wasn't selling medicine. She was giving people permission to hope. I went in for prescriptions. I left with a pulse again. Our conversations started small. Refills, dosage, polite chatter, but quickly grew into long talks about life, about how money couldn't buy health, about her dream of opening a community pharmacy that would serve anyone, insured or not. She wasn't dazzled by my last name. She looked me straight in the eye and asked questions no one else dared to. Are you sleeping? How's your daughter coping? And Selma. She adored her. I'll never forget the night my daughter whispered, Daddy, she makes me feel smart. She listens like Mom used to. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about me healing. It was about Selma being seen again. Genevieve never tried to replace LaToya. She honored her. At dinner, when Selma mentioned her mom, Genevieve didn't flinch or change the subject. She leaned in. Tell me more about her favorite songs. That's rare. Most people treat grief like an infection. something to avoid touching. Genevieve treated it like a garden that needed tending. But where Selma saw hope, Miriam and Brenda saw threat. Too fast, Brenda would hiss. Too polished. She doesn't understand this family, Miriam would warn, as if love had an entrance exam. I told myself their resistance was natural. Protective love misfiring. They'd grown comfortable holding the house together, and Genevieve represented change. But love doesn't wait for permission slips. Soon, Genevieve was woven into our lives. She cooked with Selma, left sticky notes on my mirror reminding me to breathe, dreamed with me about a future where grief wasn't the first thing people saw when they looked at us. I began to imagine again, and here's where the philosophy cuts in. Blended families are battlegrounds long before anyone throws the first stone. Widowers are policed by their own bloodlines. Don't move on too fast. Don't replace her memory. Don't disrupt what we've built in her absence. But life isn't a museum. You don't keep love preserved under glass. It either breathes or it rots. And that's the tension you need to hold in your hands as we move forward. Was I naive for believing new love could exist without threatening the old? Or was I brave enough to believe it anyway? Because the day Genevieve became my fiancée, I thought I was healing. What I didn't know was that my family wasn't preparing to accept her. They were preparing a campaign. Illness has a way of reopening graves. It started with Selma. A fever that wouldn't quit. A cough that made her ribs ache. Nothing unusual for a 13-year-old during flu season. But for me, any sign of weakness in my daughter was a trigger. Latoya's ghost leaning over my shoulder, whispering, "Don't miss the signs. Don't fail her like you failed me." I canceled meetings, stayed home. But the moment Miriam heard Selma was sick, she moved in like an army general returning to a battlefield she thought was hers. Suddenly, the house wasn't mine anymore. It was hers. She reorganized the kitchen. She dictated what Selma could eat, how often she should sleep, when she should take her medicine. And Brenda, oh Brenda, she smelled blood in the water. She arrived with suitcases as if Selma's flu had given her a lease on the master bedroom. Genevieve tried. God, she tried. She brewed teas, ran baths, whispered encouragement to Selma in the dark. But every gesture she made was cut down mid-air. "You're not family," Brenda would snap. "You don't know our ways," Miriam would add, her voice soft but poisonous. One afternoon, Genevieve suggested Selma get fresh air. Brenda pounced. "You're reckless." "Do you want her condition to get worse?" Genevieve's lips parted, her jaw set, but she looked at me for backup, and I froze. That freeze is a memory I hate. Because silence in that moment was betrayal. Weeks passed. The sickness broke. Selma got better. But something else had taken root. Genevieve's laughter was quieter. She lingered less at the dinner table. And when we made love, it felt like she was already halfway out the door. Not because she wanted to be, but because she felt like she didn't belong in the house she was supposed to call her future. I told myself it was temporary, that once Selma was fully healthy, the house would breathe again. So I came up with a plan, a birthday plan. March 15th, I wanted to erase all the doubt. I wanted to put a stake in the ground so everyone could see. Genevieve wasn't a visitor. She was the woman I chose to stand beside for the rest of my life. I had it all laid out, a brand new Mercedes, gleaming under showroom lights, wrapped in a red bow so large it looked like it had been borrowed from Times Square. 2 first-class tickets to the Maldives, where the ocean is so blue it makes your grief forget its own name. Diamond earrings that could catch the light of every dinner party she'd ever host as my wife. And a dinner reservation at that restaurant. The one she thought was booked solid for months. But those were just props. The real gift was my promise. That night, after the candles and the toasts, I would tell my mother and my sister, clearly, without hesitation, that Genevieve was not only staying, she was my future. No more tug-of-war, no more shadow games. And so I made my call, 30 minutes before arrival. To Brenda. "Hey sis, I'm about 10 minutes away. Please tell me you have Genevieve ready and waiting outside like we planned." Her voice came through sweet, almost trembling. "Oh yes, Louis. Everything is perfectly set up. She's going to be so surprised." Set up. Two words I should have heard differently. Because while I was picturing confetti, Brenda was staging crime scene photos. Here's what I didn't know at the time. Brenda had spent the morning preparing the house like a stage. She'd dressed everyone in white. My mother, my sister, even my daughter's school uniform pressed and spotless. She filled a bucket, not with clean water, but with muddy filth she'd mixed herself. She rehearsed their places. Who would stand where, who would shiver, who would whisper the perfect wounded lines. And Genevieve? She was bait. Brenda handed her the bucket, told her to help, and waited until I pulled into the driveway. Because the thing about perception? It's never neutral. It's a loaded gun. When my car turned the bend, and I saw them. 3 women I loved dripping with dirty water, and Genevieve frozen with an empty bucket. The trap snapped shut. I didn't see a setup. I saw betrayal, and I reacted exactly the way Brenda wanted me to. I chose blood over love. I chose perception over patience. I chose the lie that looked the most like truth. That was the birthday surprise. Not the bow, not the Mercedes, not the Maldives. The surprise was how quickly love can be erased when family scripts the scene. Here's the philosophy you need to sit with. Family doesn't always fight to protect you. Sometimes they fight to protect the version of you they like best. The widower, the father alone, the man who never dares to outgrow his grief. And when perception is staged, truth doesn't stand a chance in the first act. After the bucket, life became quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't heal, it corrodes. Genevieve was gone. Her toothbrush left behind. Her sweater folded on the chair. Her ring glinting like a scar on the side table. I told myself I had done the right thing. That protecting family sometimes means cutting off love before it cuts you. But here's the lie no one tells you. Silence doesn't mean peace. Silence is just noise waiting for a witness. At first, I poured myself into work. Board meetings, expansion deals, late-night strategy calls. On paper, I looked stronger than ever. Forbes loved me. Wall Street loved me. But at home, I was an absentee father with perfect attendance. Selma would shuffle into my study, her hair still damp from the shower, clutching her homework. "Daddy, can we talk?" "Of course, sweetheart. Just 1 minute, I'm on this call." But 1 minute always became 10. Then an urgent knock at the door from Brenda, or my mother calling from the kitchen. "Louis, could you help me with this?" Every time Selma tried to speak, something intercepted her. Once, twice, 10 times, a pattern, and I, fool that I was, chalked it up to bad timing. The weeks blurred into months. Brenda and Miriam grew comfortable again in the house. Too comfortable. It was as if Genevieve had never existed. They ran the home like a machine, efficient but loveless. Meals appeared. Laundry folded itself. Selma was ferried to school and back like cargo. And me? I let it happen. Because guilt disguises itself as gratitude. But the world has a way of poking holes in your narrative. One evening, while scrolling headlines, I saw her name. Genevieve Carter opens community pharmacy in Detroit, offering free care to underinsured families. There she was in the photo, ribbon-cutting scissors in hand, surrounded by people who looked at her the way Selma once did, with trust, with hope. I stared at the picture longer than I should have. If she was a monster, why was she healing the city? If she was a liar, why were strangers standing in line to thank her? The dissonance grew. Then came the dream. LaToya, not in some mystical vision, just the kind of dream that feels like a visitation. She stood in our old kitchen, wearing that faded Pistons t-shirt she loved. Her voice was steady. "You saw what someone wanted you to see, Louis. You didn't see the truth. Our daughter knows the truth." I woke with a pounding chest, sweat slick on my palms. It was just a dream, I told myself. But it didn't feel like one. A few nights later, it happened. It was midnight. The house was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I found Selma sitting cross-legged on her bed, the glow of a lamp painting her face in quiet resolve. "Daddy," she whispered, "can you close the door?" I did, her small hands twisted in her lap. "I tried to tell you. They wouldn't let me." "Tell me what, baby?" Her eyes watered, but her voice didn't shake. "Aunt Brenda, she's the one who poured the dirty water. She put it in the bucket. She told me and Grandma to stand outside in white so it would make a point. She gave Genevieve the bucket and told her to throw it out. Then she shouted right when you pulled in. Daddy, Genevieve didn't do it. They set her up." The room tilted. My breath went shallow. "Are you sure?" I asked, the coward's question. Selma's tears broke. "Daddy, I'm not stupid. I saw it. And every time I tried to tell you, they stopped me. They didn't want you to know." Something inside me snapped, not in rage, but in clarity, the silence machine. That's what my house had become. A machine designed not to protect me, but to control me. Every interruption, every detour, every urgent errand, it had all been choreography, not coincidence, and I had played my part. The next morning I called Brenda and Miriam into the living room. No raised voice, no theatrics, just steel. "You lied to me. You lied about Genevieve. You used my daughter in your performance." Miriam trembled. "We were protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" I snapped. "From love? From happiness? From a woman who treated Selma better than either of you ever did?" Brenda scoffed, arms crossed. "She was never one of us. We only did what was necessary." I pointed to the door. "Then pack, both of you. You don't get to weaponize my daughter, not in my house." Selma stood beside me, silent but steady. For once, she didn't look like a child. She looked like the truth incarnate. "Here's the life philosophy I need you to hold on to. Children are truth keepers. They see what adults edit. They feel the motives behind the smiles. And when a child finally speaks, you better listen, because that's God cutting through the noise." For months, I believed perception over proof. But perception is just a costume, and costumes fall apart when the seams are pulled by small hands brave enough to tug. That night, after Brenda and Miriam left, the house felt empty again. But this time, silence didn't feel corrosive. It felt clean. It felt like the first honest sound I'd heard since Genevieve walked out with her dignity intact. And I knew what I had to do. At sunrise, I stood on the sidewalk outside Robinson Community Pharmacy, with a riot of white roses in my arms, and a small box in my pocket that felt heavier than any briefcase I'd ever carried. The sign on the door, "Affordable care for everyone," glowed like a vow I had once demanded from her and failed to return. The bell chimed as I walked in. She looked up, thinner and steadier than before. Grief turned into muscle. "Louis," she said. Not a question, not a welcome. Just the truth of my name. "I came to give you yours," I answered, setting the flowers down between us, a white flag disguised as a bouquet. I opened the box and showed her the pendant. One word etched in a script I chose for its softness. Truth. Genevieve didn't touch it. 5 months, she said. 5 months to hear what I told you in 5 seconds on your driveway. 5 months to listen to our daughter, I said. Selma saw everything. Brenda poured dirt into clean water. She dressed them in white. She staged the angle. She told you to throw it out. I was a judge who believed the loudest witness. Genevieve's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. So you know I didn't do it. I know I failed you. I know I failed the promise I made to LaToya when she died, to protect our child by choosing the kind of love that tells the truth, even when it hurts. I set the necklace in her palm. If you'll let me, I want to rebuild what I helped break. She closed her fingers around the pendant and exhaled like something old had finally left her lungs. If we try, we do it differently, she said. No more letting your home become a courtroom where I have to argue for my own humanity. No more interruptions when Selma needs you. Counseling. Boundaries. And if you ever choose a performance over my voice again, we're done. Agreed, I said, and meant it so fully it felt like a sacrament. The bell chimed again when I left, lighter by the weight of a chance. That evening, Genevieve came to dinner. Selma opened the door before I could reach the handle, and the way she folded into Genevieve's arms is the only proof I need that forgiveness is not a theory but a body remembering a home. We moved slowly. We dated like novices. We cooked in the same kitchen where silence had once sat with a fork and knife. We went to therapy and learned that apologies are beginnings, not endings. That trust isn't rebuilt by speeches, but by small, predictable acts performed when no one is clapping. On Tuesdays, the three of us met a family therapist who handed the floor to Selma first, always first, and I learned to breathe through the discomfort of hearing where I had fallen short. I learned to say, "You're right," and let those words do their work without adding a defense that undoes the gift. A month later, I brought them into the living room, the same room where a ring had once been set down like a verdict. I knelt not to erase what happened there, but to mark it. The first time I proposed, I thought I was inviting you into my family, I told her. Today, I admit you were the one making room for us. Selma stood beside her, hands clasped at her chest, eyes wide with the yes they both gave. We married in the backyard under a spill of evening light, and the raucous cheer of people who had watched us limp and choose and limp again. There were no grand speeches about fairy tales. Only Selma's voice, clear and bright. My dad taught me that family isn't who tells the loudest story. It's who tells the truest one, and keeps telling it when it's inconvenient. I cried in a way I used to be afraid would make me look weak, and I did not apologize for it. Some vows don't need microphones. Life became ordinary in the most extraordinary ways. The house learned a new rhythm, a breakfast bowl left to soak, laughter thrown down the hallway like confetti, arguments that ended without winners because that wasn't the point anymore. Genevieve's pharmacy flourished. She hired 2 more pharmacists and added Saturday screenings for anyone who couldn't afford a doctor. At night, she came home with stories that sounded like parables, and I thanked whatever mercy rules the world that my daughter could witness this kind of usefulness. Then the phone rang with the hospital's number, and I learned my mother's heart had faltered. We went, Genevieve and Selma at my side, because love with boundaries is still love. In the antiseptic quiet, Miriam looked small on crisp sheets, contrition softening her face in a way pride never could. "I was wrong," she whispered before anyone could accuse her. I tried to hold on to my son by strangling his future. Genevieve stepped forward, the woman she is when she hands a scared patient a prescription and says, "Steady now." "I forgive you," she said. "Forgiveness isn't permission, Mrs. Johnson. It's a door we'll open with rules." Brenda took longer. She paced the tile with her old restlessness, wearing anger the way some people wear jackets they outgrew. Eventually she sat, eyes wet and mean at once. "I'm learning," she said. It wasn't an apology. It was a beginning. Sometimes that's all you get. Sometimes it's enough. We did not rush them back into our home. We built a bridge with signs on both ends. No sabotage. No triangulation. Selma's voice first. When they crossed, they walked carefully. When they forgot, we escorted them back and pointed to the signs. Love, it turns out, is not a trap or a test. It's a contract you keep renewing. Years slid into place. Selma bloomed. She found her mother's music and Genevieve's grit, and something of mine I had hoped was worth inheriting. the willingness to start over. On the day she turned 17, she handed me a card with a single sentence inside. "Thanks for finally listening." I laughed and cried and realized the rarest luxury in a rich man's life is not the villa or the view. It's the chance to be corrected by someone you'd die for and live better because you were. If you're waiting for the twist, where we learned everyone's lessons permanently, you'll keep waiting. People don't graduate from being people. Remorse isn't reform. It's the first class you pass. But I'll tell you this. The house that once weaponized interruptions now protects time like treasure. At 6 every evening, phones go dark and Selma gets the floor. We don't always agree, but we always hear her. That is our religion. So here is the meaning I promised at the start. The thing I didn't have language for when I shouted in a driveway and mistook spectacle for fact. Perception is persuasive, but truth is patient. It will wait in a child's throat and a widow's dream and a woman's steady work until someone finally turns off the noise and says, "I'm listening." The day you choose that sentence, your life rearranges itself around it. If you were with me in that courtyard, would you have paused? Would you have given the woman you loved 5 minutes that could have saved 5 months? If a child tugged your sleeve while adults performed certainty, would you sit down to her height and let her finish? I'm asking you now, not as a billionaire or a headline, but as a man who almost lost the rest of his life to a staged scene. Protect your listening. Guard it like money, like time, like breath. Make space at your table every night for the smallest voice. And when love asks you to choose between the loud and the true, choose the one that doesn't need a bucket to make its point. If this story found you where you are, if it tugged a thread in your chest or challenged the way you hold your people, say so. Tell me in the comments what you would have done on that driveway. Tell me what you've learned about truth that took you longer than it should have. Puff. Share this with someone who is mistaking noise for proof. And if you want more stories that hold a mirror up to the messy ways we love and fail and begin again, subscribe to Precify Stories, hit like, and keep the conversation alive. We've got a library full of lives, and one may be the permission slip you need tonight. My name is Lewis Johnson. I used to think money could measure a man. Now I know it's the way he turns toward the smallest voice in the room and obeys.